CBS News White House and senior foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan is in for John Dickerson on Face the Nation this week and joins me now. Margaret, let's start with North Korea. Yet another provocation this weekend. President Trump has tweeted about it. Do we have a sense of a larger strategy and how this administration is dealing with North Korea?
Well, the president is going to convene his National Security Council to talk about options. We know from the tweets he sent this morning that he's calling this a major nuclear test and saying that appeasement is not an option here. But what we have heard from this administration over the course of the week are some differing things. It seems like the president is saying diplomacy right now is not a viable option, but those in his national security cabinet, particularly the Secretary of Defense himself, Jim Mattis, have been vehement that that doesn't mean there isn't a diplomatic opening in here, that there is not a way still to avoid some sort of military confrontation. But as we talked on the show this morning with David Sanger of the New York Times and with Mike Morrell, formerly of the CIA, now here with us at CBS, there are some limited options for the administration, including some of the covert actions that perhaps they've undertaken in the past and may be able to continue to do now to try to, in some way, control the nuclear threat level. But what is clear here, as Mike Morrell told us, is that Kim Jong-un is determined to demonstrate that his nuclear capability is now a nuclear arsenal and that he can threaten the United States. And so the signals are being sent here that he wants to, if he does negotiate, do so from a position of strength.
Meanwhile, Margaret, on the domestic front, there's the question of relief funding for Harvey victims. Some Republicans have been hesitant in the past about big spending packages, for example, after Superstorm Sandy. The president now wants nearly $8 billion in relief aid. Do you think this is going to be an easy sell?
Well, that $8 billion is just really down payment because we know the administration's already saying they're going to need at least $6 billion more within a short time, and that may not be the end of it. So this is a conversation we're going to probably have a few times here in Washington by the time Houston really begins to recover. What we know is that they are gearing up to act rather quickly, at least on the House side, on that request from the White House for immediate funding relief. This is something that Democrats and Republicans seem to be at least paying lip service to and saying we can get behind it. Let's bring some of that unity we saw in Houston back to Washington and get this done. But I would suspect, and White House officials have told me, by the time that bill makes it through Capitol Hill, after the Senate gets their hands on it, you can expect a few other items to be attached to it. Immediately, remember, Congress has to act to raise the debt ceiling, keep the government funded. You may see some of those items get attached to this rather popular attempt to help out the people in Houston who've been impacted by the storm. And the White House knows very well they have a must-pass legislative vehicle in their pocket. They're going to play it for all they can.
As you know, Margaret, we're also expecting a decision from President Trump Tuesday on DACA, which protects those brought to America illegally as children from deportation. What impact could that decision have?
Well, we talk about goodwill in the wake of Harvey. This is something that is very emotional and has in many ways shown some divisions within the Republican Party itself as to what the president's decision should be. He campaigned on a promise of being tough on immigration, not making exceptions, but then he said he personally wants to have some heart here and has struggled with this decision as to what to do with these children of immigrants who brought them here illegally. And this deferred action, that DACA program that President Obama put in place, was a regulation. It wasn't a law. So what you're going to hear in the sense that Congress didn't get together and agree and write it. So Republicans like House Speaker Paul Ryan have said, let us take the ball from here and try to fix this, perhaps overhaul immigration, even if the president does act. But they're urging, Speaker Ryan among them, the president not to fully rescind this law. So by the time, or this regulation, I should say, so by the time we hear from the president on Tuesday, it's anyone's guess where he will end up. But the indications so far are that the White House wants to be able to perhaps split the difference here, meet the expectation of continuing to be tough on immigration, but not do so at the expense of alienating not only their own party, but also potential voters. This is something that strikes home for a lot of people.
So to follow up on that, Margaret, given what you just laid out, the political landscape on this issue, if the president did decide to end this program, could this have political consequences down the road for the Republican Party?
Absolutely. If you talk about trying to, if the plan had been post Romney's loss in the past election that it was going to require outreach to the Hispanic community to help strengthen the Republican Party, a lot of that plan has been reversed by the Trump campaign in terms of the vow to build the wall, be very tough on immigration. This adds yet another complication to the narrative and the relationship with the Hispanic community in this country and potential voters in this country. So that is why you are hearing, particularly from some of these Congress people like Mike Kaufman of Colorado, who have a lot of Hispanics in their districts, who have some skin in this game, that they don't see this as a clear black and white immigration issue. They understand that a lot of these children who are now adults haven't known another country beyond the United States, and their view shouldn't be punished for the sins of the father, so to speak. So this is something that Congress is going to have to struggle with if the president does sort of kick the ball over to them, saying, okay, if you love it so much, figure out a way to legislate it.
Speaking of Congress, Margaret, Senator John McCain made a point of saying recently, Congress doesn't work for President Trump, it works for the American people. What is likely to be first on Congress's agenda during the fall session?
Well, Senator McCain is coming back and gearing up for a fight in the wake of his medical treatments. He is not pulling any punches here. He's been clear that he thinks he wants to bring back to Washington a sense of getting things done, but also American leadership and some frustration here, as he said very clearly. He points the finger at the President of the United States and also the lack of congressional ability to reach across the aisle. He wants to sort of right the ship in his characterization. That's easier said than done, of course, but Congress does have to act rather immediately in the 12 working days or so they have in the month of September to fund the government, raise the debt ceiling. They have to deal with this national flood insurance program that could really affect so many of the people in Houston and in those areas affected by the storm. That's going to run out, that program, by the end of the month if Congress doesn't act. There are a number of big legislative asks that have to immediately be dealt with, and that's before we get to the president's own wish list as far as tax reform. That may get pushed into October or so before we really get to see any real drafting of potential bills here. But we know the president will be out and trying to campaign for his own tax reform package and proposals here. That, of course, is still in negotiation and being written behind the scenes as those at the White House and Capitol Hill continue to talk about what those rates could be.
A lot at stake in the days and weeks ahead. Margaret Brennan, thanks so much.